In episode 1, you met Brianna Arrington, a young mom who survived an abusive childhood, homelessness, and life on the street. She rents a room in an apartment occupied by a Norfolk, Virginia gang, and they form a family unit. Having become a member of the gang, Brianna decides this is not the right life for her and her young son. Brianna requests her walking papers, and the gang determines she knows too much, and she must die. Over the course of several hours, Brianna is stabbed multiple times in the back. She's kicked in the head. Gang members try to snap her neck and pour bleach down her throat. Finally, they take her out to a car and shoot her point blank in the head. In what can only be described as a miracle, Brianna survives and identifies her attackers. We pick up the story as law enforcement springs into action. I'm Chris Gotzik, and this is Chasing Evil. Now it's time to get these people in custody.
Yes. So once I got all the arrest warrants secured, that is when Lance and Nikki and their team pulled off a miracle, a second miracle in this case.
As a reminder, Nikki and Lance's and Chris's team is the Capital Area Regional Fugitive Task Force of the U.S. Marshals. Some call the crown jewel of the task force. How come none of you are saying, yeah, that's right?
Amen.
There you go.
We agree.
Okay, this is a really unique circumstance. I have been out on arrests with the Marshals Service where it's difficult to get one. You have 10 facing you. What's the strategy that you come up with for this?
So about a month time span, Matt had been coming to our office and giving us a heads up on the front end that this case was coming forward. And each time he would visit us, we were getting more in details as to what occurred to Brianna this night. Mm-hmm. And with that, we were also getting more individuals that were identified as potential suspects who would be charged. Lance and I had multiple conversations between each other and with our whole team about how this was going to kind of have to be a unique operation in terms of what we normally do, just because based off of the number of individuals that we were going to be targeting for an arrest, the severity of the crime, and knowing that we were going to have to collect evidence along the way.
Like you said, we are handed one case, one person has active warrants. This case, we get 10 fugitives. Me and Nikki compromised the plan along with our unit and our command to basically try to go after all these people in one day to roll it into one operation.
Why is that?
Because we wanted to preserve evidence. We were worried about people fleeing, the fact that there was a gang nexus with these people, the targets, threats to family and the victim. So what we wanted to do was to roll this into one day to try to pick up everybody in the same day so that we wouldn't have to worry about people making phone calls and are people fleeing and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So this turns into Normandy. I mean, this is a massive operation now that you guys don't normally do. This is huge.
It was the biggest single case that we had ever worked, arresting people in one day. Historically, we've done warrant roundups where we go out and we try to arrest low-level people all in one day, but they're all different cases, right? This is one solid case with 10 different co-defendants, fugitives, that we're dealing with.
And how many people does this involve?
We've talked before. Me and Nikki think around 80 to 100 people that we have. And the unique thing on this one was we got a lot of latitude from our command, whether it be the Norfolk PD side or the Cardiff side, to be able to have patience to work this like the way we wanted to do it. Because initially, in a case of this violence, your command, whether it's the chiefs or the captains or whatever, they want immediate results. And what we explained to them was, in order for me and Nikki and the rest of our team to do our investigation properly, to be able to give us all the pieces of the puzzle to put 10 targets down in one day, we were going to need time. And ultimately, it took us a couple weeks. Even knowingly that they had PC to take out warrants, we were asking for additional time to be able to line them all up in one day.
So not only did you have to locate 10 individuals, but then you had to keep track of those individuals while you were locating the other individuals, right?
Yes, sir.
So how did you do that?
Legal process. We did a lot of orders. We did a lot of search warrants, things like that, to constantly stay on top of the whereabouts of these targets, so that when it came game time, the day of the arrest, we would know exactly where they were at and be able to have surveillance teams on each target as we started the day.
Right.
We had about 2 weeks where Lance and I were kind of doing all of this work in the background leading up to the day of the arrest, whereas between the physical surveillance of things and kind of figuring out where all of these guys were laying their heads at or where we could find them, in all while formulating the actual operation. And that's Chris helped us out a lot with that too. In those 2 week span, it was tons of investigative work to kind of identify where these guys are at.
And everybody seems to always be on the move. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I'll sleep here that night. I'll sleep here another
they were
night.
everywhere.
Not a ton of consistency. And we were meeting with Katie and her counterparts, like Nikki said, daily, weekly, getting orders, meeting with the judges to try to get us what we needed to have it on the day of the op.
Right. And I know the marshals usually use this pattern of life analysis. Did that come into play in this operation?
Absolutely. Between the physical surveillance and some of the
Social media.
Yeah, the social media and some of the evidence that we were obtaining through the search warrants, we were able to kind of develop how some of these guys and girls that we were going after, where they were frequenting, who they might be found with.
Did you have to be careful in doing something that might tip them off? Something was coming down the pipe?
Well, as far as physical surveillance, and we didn't go out and do a ton of that just because we weren't trying to turn the heat up on them.
Right.
They know what they did. Obviously, they're just waiting. Is it going to be found out that they did it, or are they going to get away with it? But, they're cognizant of what they did. So for us to put cars out there and drive by addresses and sit in areas that they're at, we just didn't do that. We would ride by, collect what we needed to collect, and we'd go back to the office and keep doing what we were doing with our investigation.
So you've done all your homework. You kind of feel like approximately where 10 individuals are located. June 11th, 2020 comes. That's D-Day. How do you kick it off? Does everybody launch at the same time?
So I think there was 8 teams in total, arrest teams, that we had. And we kind of broke them out depending on, again, they were between multiple cities. I think there's 3 different cities that we were looking at potentially, maybe even 4. And so about 8 different arrest teams. We utilized Norfolk SWAT as a search warrant for a location in Norfolk, and then Virginia Beach SWAT for a location in Virginia Beach. And that was for 2 different of the co-defendants. So they kind of we planted them first thing in the morning. So that was early 6 a.m.
How many of the 10 had gun charges, or were you aware that they may have guns?
All of them.
Oh, 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
And that would kind of dictate a little bit of how you were going to approach this, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, so we had about 8 of our teams, and Lance and I were kind of in the background where we kind of were just watching. We weren't part of any of the arrest teams or anything like that. We pretty much had the most information and knowledge at that point of the investigation in terms of where everyone was that we were looking for. So we kind of stayed out of the line of being the front hand of any part of the arrest team. We briefed early in the morning, some the night before, and we gave them a location and their target. So each team had generally one target that they were responsible for. And so once they set up on each of those locations, they established surveillance at all of those locations. And once we had all of our teams set in the locations where we believed these individuals to be, that's when we gave the go-ahead for our 2 SWAT teams, so our Norfolk SWAT team and Virginia Beach, to execute the search warrants that they were going to be doing. In conjunction to, they had a search warrant for a residence in hopes that one of the individuals with an arrest warrant would be inside of the locations.
Mm-hmm.
So they were the first 2 to execute any type of activity. And they did those around 7 a.m., I believe. So both of those were executed, and I think from that there was 3 individuals that we got into custody, 1 in Virginia Beach and 2 in the Norfolk address.
8:30, we had 7 people in custody.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
yeah, so where the actual incident happened to Brianna, that was, I guess, identified as one of the gang hangouts. So we knew that there was likely going to be tons of evidence, not only involving the actual incident, but the gang itself. And I think there we found Killa and, was it Red Ruby that was there as well? I think there was both of them that were there inside of the residence, and they were able to arrest them, and then they followed up with a search warrant for the evidence there.
So was everybody where they were supposed to be?
For the most part, but there was a couple moving parts towards the end that, they weren't in the spots we thought, but we were able to develop some stuff on the fly and put them down.
Yeah, it was a pretty wild thing. Like Lance and I were sitting in the car at one point, and all we're hearing, we're not seeing anything. We're just hearing the radio transmission and everything, all the traffic with the radio going on, and you would hear arrest team 2 in custody, arrest team 3, 1 in custody. And as soon as it started rolling, I mean, each of our arrest teams, they started putting out over the radio, hey, we got eyes on so-and-so. They're coming out. Boom. And there was a couple that we had not 100% laid down, but we had, through our investigation of those 2 weeks, we had a pretty decent idea of where they would be at. Specifically, Lady Lawless and her husband, who was Shmurda, right? So we knew that they would likely be together. And I remember at one point, we had surveillance at Lawless's house. And
over in Portsmouth.
Right. Our team, they couldn't tell for sure if it was her at that point. So Lance and I think we have almost everybody in custody at this point. And so Lance and I head that way. We see her leaving, and she's getting into an Uber, and she's packing the trunk with, like, suitcases. I mean, like, large suitcases. She's going somewhere. Okay. She's going out of town.
Steamers. She's ready for a voyage.
She's going on a little trip. Okay. I don't, at this point, and there's no reason for us to believe everything happened so quickly, and everything was pretty tight to the arrest operation, where there was no indication where any of them knew that people were getting picked up for arrested. So I don't think that wasn't too much of a concern for us with her, but I think she was definitely leaving town. So she gets in the Uber, and Lance and I kind of follow her from that location, and we're trying to coordinate where she could potentially be going. And we know that she's not with the other co-defendant, her husband, so he's still outstanding. And so we're following her, and Lance and I we do the traffic stop with the Uber driver. We stop them. We talk to the Uber driver, kind of interview her or him. We get her into custody, right? And through the interview with the driver, we identify the address that she's going to. And it's an address that came up in our investigation, Lance and I's prior, while we were developing locations.
Right.
And we already had a team, thankfully, over there, just as a catch-all, hey, this is a likely area where this person could be. And we had a team there, so we kind of just relayed it over to them, hey, she was going to this address. And around that time, they actually saw Shmurda come out of that house and identified him.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And he fled from police.
He sure did.
So when we were following her, we got off at Ballantyne, which we did do a traffic stop. But when she got off at Ballantyne, me and Nikki were like, 1550 was right around the corner. So at that point in time, we were like, she's probably going to her husband. So like she said, we interviewed the Uber driver, but she even made a statement that I'm going to go see my husband. So when that happened, I called one of the guys on our team that was already set up over there and said, hey, she was likely going to him. Look out. And sure enough, like Nikki said, he comes out of the house, they go to make contact with him, and it turns into a foot pursuit. And they ended up getting him into custody. But to highlight, one of the cool things with the investigation was she was talking about the address at 1550. She was on social media and saw this Facebook Live. And we could see 1550, the numerical written on the side of the vinyl siding or whatnot.
Right.
And we knew the general area, but we didn't know the definitive street. So me and Nikki get on Google Earth Pro, and we start street viewing all these different at numericals within this proximity that we thought that he would be in. And that's kind of what brought us to that address, was that we saw the 1552 in the Facebook Live. We found one that matched on Google Earth Pro on the Street View, and sure enough, we actually, prior to the arrest, this was one of the guys that we actually saw and rode by to do surveillance just to spot check the address, and he was out on the porch, a couple days prior to the actual op going off.
Wow.
Yeah, so the last one that was still outstanding to be placed in custody was Too Much or Turn Up, and he was associated to sex, money, murder as another gang. So when he came up in our investigation of trying to find these guys, we didn't have an address for him, and coincidentally enough, later on through the day, we were still looking for him, trying to identify where he was, and information came to us at some point that he was currently in an academy for a correctional facility. So he was actually in some sort of arrest tactics class, I think, at the time that we notified them that he was up there working.
Well, it would be the right place for him, just on the wrong side.
Yeah.
Okay, that's got to be a surprise.
It was a shock to us all.
Okay, and how did that takedown go down?
We spoke to the officers there. We sent one of our teams up there to support the arrest. It was a few hours away, and we told them that this person not only had a warrant, but what the warrant was for. They were more than surprised.
And did he have a criminal history?
He did not.
Oh.
He did not.
Okay.
So,
which is probably why they used him to infiltrate the Department of Corrections, because obviously you can't have a criminal record. So if you're in a gang and you have an affiliate that is clean like that, that is somebody who is a very good candidate to infiltrate the DOC and to potentially do more work for the gang in that context.
He was high ranking with the sex, money, murder gang out of Virginia Beach, so him getting into the career that he was striving for would be detrimental to the system as a whole, because now you have somebody of high rank that's working inside. Don't know what they did with their background investigation. I would assume it would involve doing a Facebook search for a candidate, but I was quite easily able to find his Facebook account, and it showed all his gang ties on his Facebook account.
Okay.
So that was revealed. I revealed that to that particular department because they reached out to me as to what I knew and what their investigators failed to find.
So this one just slipped by everyone.
Just slipped by, and it was a very big slip, because giving the rank that he had in the other gang.
Right. He was going to do some damage. And the arrest went fairly easily, yeah?
yeah, I would say that was one of the easier ones to coordinate compared to the rest. I think it was coordinating of them calling him into an office, and they were able to place him into custody there. And then they notified us, and that was kind of like, oh, we got all 10 targets in custody before 5 p.m. at that point.
Fantastic.
We had Marshals Service personnel from all over the state that had come in, so that team had come in early that morning, and they had kicked off the initial D-Day assault, I guess, as we're calling it, and then they were all just going back home. And I remember we were sitting there in the office, and that piece of info came in. A couple more phone calls were made, and, well, hey, we got guys that are 30 minutes from there. So it was a pretty nice way to wrap up the day, where we're sitting there with 9 for only a couple hours, not sure where number 10 was.
Yeah.
And then we were able to call our team that had gone back to their part of Virginia, and they were able to put the handcuffs on this guy and close out and go 10 for 10. So that was a great way to end it.
Yeah.
So a very, very successful operation.
It was one of the most rewarding investigations, like, hands down, we ever worked.
Right.
Yeah.
Typically, Murphy always pokes his head out and something doesn't go the way it should when, on our D-Day. And there was bumps in the road with what came up, but ultimately just the amount of investigative work that went into this kind of allowed for little bumps in the road to not throw the whole thing off. So normally when you have the more people, the more leadership involved in a case, the more people, at this point we had between 80 to 100 law enforcement officers. Typically that invites more ways to do things, more ideas. We had multiple jurisdictions, but ultimately it all came down to is Nikki and Lance were working with Walsh far ahead and saying, give us all 10, we'll do them all in one day, and that's what happened.
Right.
And I would just like to say that I appreciate the efficiency of this team that day, but I was not expecting that many fugitives coming to my office at once for an interrogation. So I was, as they're running around too, I'm running around my office trying to figure out where I'm going to put all these individuals, because I have to do interrogations with, like Nikki said, they had 8 of the 10 by 8 a.m., and I was not expecting that many. You could have spaced out just a little bit, guys. Just space out just a little bit.
This is Matt's time to shine. This is a lot of people coming in, and you're going to have to talk to them all, and hopefully someone will request a lawyer so that that'll cut that conversation short.
If I remember correctly, I think almost all of them requested a lawyer at first on this initial day when they were all rounded up and arrested.
Yeah. Well, this is where I have to wonder who should get the Academy Award nomination. This is the first time that you're talking to everybody. And from the tapes that I've listened to, no one knows anything. No one knows any of the other people, even though they're in pictures all over Facebook with them. They have all of a sudden come up with a case of amnesia. They are outraged that something terrible happened to Brianna, someone that they love and would stick up for. And the acting that was going on in those rooms, I can't believe the patience, Matt, that you had during these interviews. You did not get flustered once. You did not raise your voice. And I am in the background as I'm listening to these. I'm screaming, "Are you joking?" I'm so angry that they're trying this ruse. Just say, I have to talk to a lawyer, but don't go with the whole, reconstructing reality.
There was a lot of Oscar-level performances that day in the interview rooms.
They will now all go to jail. You are keeping them separate so they can't compare stories.
Yes, that's where the Norfolk Sheriff's Office, their team inside the jail, were a tremendous help for me to keeping them separated in jail so they didn't speak to each other.
Okay. And so what's your strategy now?
It's always a game of chess. They're trying to find out how much information I know. I want to know as much information that they know. So it's a back and forth in the interrogation as to who is the better chess player. A lot of times in this particular case, all of them pretty much requested a lawyer at the end of their interview. And then the next step is where I get involved with Katie's office, is now they're going to learn from their attorneys exactly what type of charges that are coming down the pipe. Originally, I issued 11 arrest warrants, and then I believe Katie's office issued additional 20-plus arrest warrants on top of my original 11. And that's when they all started realizing that they're all looking at life in prison based on how many charges they're looking at. And that's usually when they consult with their attorneys, and their attorneys are looking at the amount of charges that are being sought against them, and that usually gives them an idea of, hey, the Norfolk Police Department, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office appears to have a pretty strong case against you. You may want to cooperate.
Okay.
And that sometimes just just the number of charges that they're looking at or what's actually being brought against them is a deciding factor for them to cooperate. And then also they're trying to find out through jail, they'll try getting kites or messages to each other in the jail to see if what people said, who snitched.
But you're
who talked.
purposely putting them in different jails.
Different jails or different areas of the jail. We had some in the Norfolk City jail, some in the Hampton Roads Regional Jail. There may have been another jail that was involved, but we tried keeping them at least separated in separate jails and in separate areas within the jail.
Okay. So, Katie, you now have 10 individuals on the same case that realize if convicted, they could all face life. You have to weigh your options. So what did the defense attorneys tell you?
So there's always a process by which the attorneys and their clients get more information about the strength of our case, what the evidence against their client is, what particular role each defendant played, and based on that, then we can start to have the discussion between the defense attorneys and I about where the case is headed. Because now that they have attorneys, everything goes through their defense attorneys. So I kind of look at it in different steps. Once they're all arrested, the first thing that happens is they'll go in for their first appearance, their arraignment, and they'll want to have a bond hearing. They have their attorney for their first bond hearing, and that's the first opportunity I have to tell a judge why they should remain in jail pending trial. And in order to do that, I essentially give a summary of our evidence. And so that is the first time that all 10 of them, I believe, asked for a bond hearing. And so that's the first time that they and their attorneys are hearing what we have. And of course, I don't share everything, but we've got a lot in this case.
And just out of curiosity, how many of them got bond?
None.
Good.
In a lot of ways, I think probably many of them and many of their attorneys knew they were not going to get bond, but a bond hearing is an important hearing because it is the first time that I have to talk to the judge a little bit about what our evidence is. And so it helps everybody sort of level set with what is it that we're really talking about here? How strong is the evidence? What is it exactly that my client did? What are we looking at in terms of where this case moves? And
based on your experience, how strong did you think your evidence was?
I thought the evidence in this case was pretty strong. It is difficult. What makes the case difficult is that our best witness in this case is our victim, Brianna. And because of the nature of the trauma that she suffered, her ability to narrate the exact order of events and who did what is not as linear as somebody who, say, witnesses a car crash or something like that.
Right.
So we have that difficulty, but we also have a lot of evidence in this case to substantiate what she's saying happened, the social media, the statements that the defendants made either first when they're arrested or kind of the second round. So it's an evolving thing, and the case here gets stronger over time because many of the defendants in this case did opt to talk to us once they did have an attorney and wanted to provide some more information so that they could have that benefit to their side.
So did you see that coming? Because some of these people aren't going to get a tremendous amount of time, so they're going to want to
Yes.
cooperate.
It is very, very likely in a case like this where you have many defendants, especially some that are more low level in the gang and some that are less involved in the actual violence, they have a particular incentive to cooperate and provide information because they are likely looking at less time in jail because they are lower in the gang and did fewer things. Sometimes people who are high up also want to give information if they think they're, the goose is cooked and all they can do at this point is help us out and beg for mercy. Everybody looks at it a little bit different, but I would say in my experience, in cases where you have a lot of co-defendants, it is very, very, very common that they start turning on each other, start giving us information,
Right.
and want to get the best deal that they can get out of it compared to everybody staying silent and rolling the dice.
Right. Do you promise a plea deal prior to them speaking to you, or do you say it's based on what you have to say?
So what we do is, in cases like this where they have an attorney, we bring the attorney in before they come in for this secondary interview once they've got their lawyer. And I speak with both their lawyer and the defendant, and I put it in writing that there is no guarantee that anything that they say to us is going to give them any benefit, that it may, but there are no guarantees. You don't get a specific plea deal. You don't get specific time shaved off, none of that. The only thing that I promise is if they are truthful with us, I will make the judge or the jury aware of that when we're talking about a final sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And that is all dependent on them providing truthful information to us. So if they provide us truthful and helpful information, it likely will help them, but I never make any promises as to how. Simply that I will let the judge know about it so that their attorney can use that to their benefit.
And of the 10, how many raised their hands for a plea deal, please?
Eventually, all 10 of them ended up pleading. It was kind of a cascade, if you will. And we knew this going in. We sort of targeted especially some of the girls who were younger, less involved, lower in the gang, no prior criminal records, who were probably looking at less time. It is very common for us to sort of, and Matt and I had talked about this ahead of time, for us to know, okay, we're going to look at probably Thump, probably Jin. Some of these girls who had a closer relationship with Brianna, who had less of a criminal record, who were going to spend less time in jail, but could really maybe give us some good information, we knew that they were probably the first person who would, one, want to talk to us, and two, that we would be willing to talk to and to provide some benefit. So typically what you do is you sort of start on the low end of the totem pole and you work your way up. And that's essentially what we did here, is we started with anybody who wanted to talk to us, but we started mostly with the younger, lower ranking girls and kind of rolled up from there.
Right. And then what happened when you got to 3 shots, Lawless, and Say So?
There was a discussion with basically almost everybody's attorney about potentially coming in and debriefing with us. That's what we call the secondary interview once they've been arrested, as a debrief. Everybody, I think, knew that this was a tough case and they were looking at a lot of time. So everybody was exploring their options. Different people kind of waffled on whether they wanted to talk to us or not. And we also had opinions about which people we wanted to talk to. So, for example, Say So, he was the shot caller here. He was, in our opinion of who did what, the most culpable, one of the worst actors here. And so
By the way, he was one of the worst actors on his initial interview. He was terrible. I don't know.
Yeah.
These people that can't be trusted. They don't listen to me. I would stand up for her. I call her my sister.
Yeah,
he just...
Yeah, he downplayed his role significantly in the initial interview, trying to make it appear as if he had nothing to do with this, where he lost all control of his gang, and that they just went out on their own to make these decisions, that he was not a part of anything.
And that's not an uncommon strategy, because people think that if the way to get around this is to put it on other people or downplay their role, they know that they can't fully get away from what happened. We obviously have enough evidence that we've got arrest warrants for something. So a lot of people think that their best bet is to not outright deny anything happened, but to mitigate or put it on other people as much as possible. And that's exactly what Say-So did in his initial interview with the detective.
And that's when it comes into being, I was talking about earlier about playing a game of chess where they're trying to find out what I know. I want to know what they know.
Right.
And we're going back and forth, and they're trying to bleed me for information. I'm trying to bleed them for information to see where they're at, depending on how hardened of a criminal they are. Somebody that's not as hard of a criminal may come into the interrogation with me and immediately just spill the beans.
Right.
Somebody who's been in the street a while, they know how to play this game, so they're going to go back and forth with me a little bit more.
Right. And so with Say-So, you ended up not debriefing him?
Yes, and this, I want to be a little careful here because I left the office before he pled. So I did not handle the final decisions with him, but he went through preliminary hearing with me, and I had discussions with his defense attorney, but I know that he did not end up debriefing. And a big part of what went into that decision was we considered him to be one of the most culpable people, and we also had strong evidence against him. And so we wanted to ask for a lot of time for him to serve, and we frankly didn't want to give him consideration for debriefing with us because we already knew what we needed to know, and we weren't interested in hearing it from him and maybe shaving some years off. He didn't deserve that consideration, and so we turned it down.
Great. And Katie's correct. When she left the office, I never had a debrief with Say-So, and I told her office I wasn't even interested in doing a debrief with him because of the fact that I didn't want to give him any consideration for sentencing or for any consideration by the courts.
Right. And what about Lawless?
Lawless was never super interested in debriefing. She originally was one of the ones who, on the day of, basically flat out denied everything and was not cooperative with Detective Walsh. And if I am recalling correctly, again, her final plea was after I left the office. But I don't believe that she was ever super interested in debriefing.
She did a very short debrief. She did do a debrief after you left the office. Okay. But her participation in the debrief was not wholehearted. She definitely was holding back facts. She was not giving me the full picture like the other individuals at debrief gave me full accounts of what happened that night and their involvement, and then try to avoid or downplay their involvement. Right. A little bit. Anyone's going to downplay a little bit of their involvement, but the other ones that debriefed, I could say that they were telling me true, accurate depictions of what happened that night. With Lawless, she still continued even during the debrief to deny and downplay her involvement. She's just trying to save her own ass at the end of the day.
Right.
She physically did less to Brianna than some of the men did. However, it was clear to me, at least personally, and I think Detective Walsh as well, from the debriefs of the other individuals, that she was really the main driving force in killing Brianna and trying to kill her. That's not to say she physically did it, but she was the one really pushing for that. And so that's another case of us being reluctant to give her consideration because we considered her very culpable in what happened.
And how did you handle 3 shots who actually fired the gun?
His attorney and I did at some point discuss a potential debrief. And Walsh, did he actually debrief with us?
No, he never debriefed.
Yeah, I don't. He went back and forth as to whether or not he wanted to, and he never did end up debriefing with us.
So you can still get a plea without debriefing?
Yes. And some of it, when we talk about pleas, there's a lot that goes into it, but a lot of it is a calculation that the defendant and the defense attorney do for what is their best possible outcome, what is the likely outcome. You know, you're doing a risk analysis. If I say I'm not guilty and I go to trial, what is the maximum number of years I get? If I say I'm guilty and fall on my sword and beg for mercy, what is the likelihood that the judge is going to give me less time? And so, for example, he is the one who actually pulls the trigger. He has a prior criminal record, so he's looking at some mandatory time with the guns. He was a prior violent felon, so by definition, he is, by our sentencing guidelines, which are based on inputting your prior criminal record and the charges you have, it spits out this kind of average range. And so he was looking at more time as a baseline than many others. And so that changes the calculation for him. Mm-hmm. So every defendant has to make that calculation based on what they're charged with, what their record is, what information they can provide. And it's a very personalized assessment that each person and each attorney makes. And everyone, even though they have similar charges, every single one of them had very different potential outcomes. And so they have to look at that and make that assessment for themselves, each one.
And he's only, 18, 19, so he's going to potentially have a future?
Yes. Most of these people, depending on what times they got, many of them will come out of jail when they still have time to have a life. Some of them will be quite old when they get out, and say so may never get out. So that is a calculation that some of them are doing too, is do I want to have the potential to have a life after this versus rolling the dice and taking a potential life sentence?
Right. And real briefly, what are some of the other considerations as the Commonwealth's attorney that you think about when discussing whether a plea is even possible?
So the first thing that we think about, the most important thing to us, is the victim and their input. So Brianna and I talked about what she wanted to see happen with the case. And Brianna was very, I think, fair and realistic with what she wanted to see happen, which was essentially just that she wanted everybody to have justice served. And she left up to me and the system as to what that meant for each individual person. So the first thing we do is we talk to the victim. Mm-hmm. The next thing that I look at is I look at their prior criminal record, if they have any record at all, if it's violent, if it involves things with guns or shootings, assaults like this before, because if they have that in their past, that to me shows them to be more dangerous because it's something that they're doing regularly. And then the last biggest thing that we look at is their individual culpability. So there's a range of people, starting with Say-So, who gives the order, and Killa and Three Shots, who actually do the shooting, Lawless, who is really pushing it, down to some of the girls at the bottom of that culpability spectrum who are definitely responsible but are less responsible.
Right.
And so we take all of those things into consideration, and we start thinking about what would be a fair outcome in those cases. And then I start talking to each individual attorney about, if your client is willing to plead guilty and not put Brianna through a trial and, accept responsibility, this is what I can agree to recommend to a judge would be a fair outcome if they're willing to forego a trial.
Mm-hmm. And all 10 said yes.
Yes. 2 of them very immediately, what we call waived their preliminary hearing, meaning they didn't even have the first hearing where Brianna testified. They were willing to sort of right from the jump to work with us and to take a deal. And the other 8 had the preliminary hearing where Brianna and a bunch of other witnesses came in and testified to the court about the evidence that we had. Following that hearing and the additional charges that we brought, then there was sort of the waterfall of people wanting to talk about deals at that point. And eventually the last one to plead was Say-So, and they have all now pled guilty and been sentenced.
Okay. We're just going to use their street names, but let's go down. I will give you the name, and the sentence and tell me what you think of it in terms of being within the range and what it actually means.
Okay.
So Turnup got 10 years, 4 active, 6 suspended, 10 years on probation.
How that works is he serves 4 years up front. Then once he is released, he has 6 years hanging over his head, and he's got terms and conditions. So he's got to be on probation, be of good behavior, check in with his probation officer, not commit any other acts, have no contact with Brianna, and he won't go back to jail to serve those remaining 6 years if he complies. If he doesn't, then those 6 years can be imposed on him.
And then on top of that, he got 10 years probation?
Correct. He'll serve his 4 years, and then for the 10 years after his release, he has to do all of the probation conditions, be a good behavior, not contact Brianna. If he doesn't, then he faces potentially those 6 years being imposed that were remaining.
Okay. Thump got 35 years total, but 4.5 active, 30.5 suspended. So 4.5 years.
Correct. She got 4.5 years to serve.
If she steps out of line once and commits any other crime, she's going for 30 years?
Yes. Some of it is partly just due to the nature of different judges doing the sentencing. When you do these sentencings, it's not only just what happens in this case. There's what we call a pre-sentence investigation report that probation prepares, and the judge gets a ton of information, not just about what happened here, but what they did when they were in school, what their family is, what their job is, if they've ever used drugs. There's so many factors that the judge uses when fashioning these sentences, and it was not all one judge who did all of these. So sometimes there is some of that variation. I think I was most concerned bottom line with the active portions,
right.
But all of them do have significant amounts of time hanging over their head and will be on probation.
Okay, so we'll just go to Killa. Got 68 years, 36 years active.
Correct.
So he'll serve 36, or do you want, in the state, you only have to serve a percentage of that?
It can always change, but the way that it currently works in Virginia is there is no parole, meaning if you're sentenced to a certain amount of time, you serve that time. However, you do get credit for good time while you're there. And that formula can and does change. The Department of Corrections uses it, the legislature sets it, but essentially what it is if you behave while you're in prison, you get a percentage off. Now, for a crime like this, the violent crime, it's a very low percentage. Like, he'll serve 90 to 95% of that time.
Okay.
So it's not like he serves half of it.
Okay.
He will serve the vast majority of that time, but it is up to the DOC and the legislature what the exact formula is, and it's always subject to change.
Okay. Lawless got 55 years, 21 active.
Correct.
Did you think that was an appropriate sentence for her?
I always considered Lawless to be one of the most culpable, and wanted her to have a significant sentence. It was a little bit of an uphill battle with her because she was maybe smart enough to keep her hands clean a little bit more than some of the guys.
Mm-hmm.
And she also didn't have really a significant record at all versus some of these other guys that did.
Okay.
But knowing what I know about what her sentencing guidelines would be, what her background is and stuff, I think 21 years is a good outcome for her. I was worried that maybe it would be less than that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a fair outcome for what we were working with.
Okay. And 3 shots who fired the gun got 90 years, 34 active.
Correct.
Is that a good sentence? It feels a little light to me.
It's all relative, and a big part of this is the role of the sentencing guidelines,
Right.
Which I don't have every person's in front of me, but how it works in Virginia is when you plead guilty to a set of charges, we input those charges into a formula based on your record, your charges, other factors, and it spits out this range. And that range is a historical average so that people in Norfolk get sentenced similarly to people in Richmond or Northern Virginia.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of what these defendants got was dictated by what that range was. Judges can go above or below it, but generally speaking, especially if you plead guilty, usually judges will stick with that range because that is kind of the standard that you're working with.
Okay.
So, look, I totally agree that in these cases that they probably, some of them would be justified in serving more time, but they did plead guilty. The judge is taking into account the fact that they, accepted responsibility, didn't put Brianna through a trial. There's always a risk if we go forward with trial that maybe something goes sideways. Right. So, I absolutely, I don't know that there's an amount of time that is ever justice in these cases. Right. But I think all told, knowing what I know about how judges sentence and what the guidelines are, that is a sentence that I am not surprised by.
Right. Okay. I mean, when I say it feels a little light, I'm just a guy, on the street saying, you know what, this is a guy who I don't think should ever be in society. But
and sometimes
I hear what you're saying.
Sometimes people get a lot more than I expect them to. Sometimes people get a lot less. Sometimes I'm right on the money. Right. There are a lot of factors that go into each case. Every defendant, every case, every judge is different. And so all told, when I look at, frankly, each of these, they're within the range of what I would expect, more or less. Well,
that brings us, I'm going to skip some of them, and let's just go to say so. Mm-hmm. Because this one was above and beyond.
Yes.
He got life plus 38 years.
Correct.
So what does that mean?
What that means is he is expected to spend the rest of his life in jail. In Virginia, you can be eligible for parole even on a life sentence. It's what we call geriatric parole. Mm-hmm. Essentially, once he reaches the age of 60, because he'll be older, they can start considering him for parole. But we don't have the 95% rule there because it's a life sentence. So there's no, at year 40, even if you don't behave in jail, you've served your 40 years, you're done, you're out. He is expected to remain in unless he convinces the parole board, once he reaches his geriatric age, to let him out.
Okay. And where does the 38 come in to play?
That is essentially in addition to, so the 38 is just kind of icing on top of the cake with a life sentence. I suppose if something were to happen where that life sentence got commuted or on appeal or something like that, we'd still have those 38 years. But you kind of add everything together, and all told, he will be in jail for the rest of his life unless he's paroled.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Just to mention what the defendants were charged with, there was an attempted first-degree murder, malicious wounding, abduction, strangulation, child neglect, cruelty to children, conspiracy, aggravated malicious wounding, use of a firearm, and everybody was charged with all of them, whether or not they pulled the trigger.
Yes. In Virginia, if you are what we call a principal in the second degree, meaning that you are not the one who pulled the trigger, you are not the one who did the strangulation, you are not the one who, tried to suffocate her, but you aided in that process, you were instrumental as part of a mob in the whole thing happening, then you can be found guilty as a principal in the second degree, exactly like the person who actually pulls the trigger is.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much for that. I've always wanted to know the answers to those questions, so I really appreciate the clarity. That puts them away for quite a while and should be the end of the story. However, there was some anger toward some of the people who flipped, even though everybody flipped. And how did that manifest itself, Matt Walsh?
So, yes, during the investigation, like I said earlier, part of my investigation, I'm going to listen to jail calls, intercept jail mail. Anything you do while you're incarcerated is being recorded or copied. During that process, I came across some jail calls that Say So was making to his wife, where they were discussing how they were going to kill the co-defendants and ultimately kill Brianna. They talked about how there was individuals that were in the Norfolk City Jail and Hampton Roads Regional Jail that were ready to put in the work, which meant that they were ready to carry out the acts of taking out the co-defendants or taking out Brianna on the outside, who was living her life at this time. The risk factor never really came about with Brianna really being truly at risk. It was more of now looking at the co-defendants who were in this case, who are now incarcerated, that now are potentially housed with individuals that we had not yet identified that could ultimately try killing them. At the end of the day, we still have to try protecting the individuals that are being incarcerated.
And of course, I think of immediately, obviously these things happened and how quickly it happened in the Whitey Bulger case, where he was brought someplace, I think it was within, an hour, they had beat him to death. So it happens.
Oh, yeah, and it does happen. And there were some of the gang members in this case. They did get assaulted in jail, not as a result of what I just spoke about being taken out, but because they failed as a gang. They failed. They got revealed. They brought a bad image to the Rolling 20 Outlaws, and a lot of them were being jumped in jail just because of their failures.
And the Bloods in L.A. disassociated with them.
Yeah, from what I could gather through conversations, through the phone conversations, that they were distancing themselves from this particular set in Newport News, in Norfolk area.
So you won't have that protection in jail.
No, they were trying to affiliate themselves with different gangs, other gangs, or just asking the jails for help in protecting themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, they're behind bars for the foreseeable future, which brings us back to Brianna. So everyone's in prison. How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel like at least I got some justice for what happened to me and my son.
Mm-hmm. And yet you still have some compassion for them.
Yeah, it sucks, but I do kind of feel bad for, the ones I had bonds with. I shouldn't, but I do.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing them cry kind of hurt my feelings, and seeing that, one or two not able to speak to their family and hug their family made me hurt or made me cry for them, which I shouldn't have, but I did.
Mm-hmm. So they're behind bars. It was one night beyond anyone's imagination of what you had to endure. Mm-hmm. But that was just that night. This nightmare is going to be with you forever, maybe. So tell us what the aftermath was like.
I haven't went through all of the operations because of the fact that it was too much. I was supposed to get something done on my spine, which I really didn't get that done until this year, for my lower back where they stabbed me at. That was February 9th. Supposed to get something done on my jaw because it's out of line, but they are having trouble. I haven't got that done yet because of the bullet pieces in my head are causing them to not do an MRI. So they're just like, oh, we're just going to cut you open and see what we have to do when you cut you open. So I'm like, oh, you know what? Just leave it. Let it be like this. Mm-hmm. I'm good, because what if you cut me open, don't know what you're doing, and then I have a scar for no reason.
Right.
So.
And you lost the hearing in one of your ears?
I'm completely deaf in one of my ears. I feel vibrations in it. But as far as sound, I can't hear anything. Of course, my sight on my right side is gone. So everything on the right side is just dead. But
and you told me you can't work because you can't stand up for long periods of time. You can't sit down for long periods of time.
Yeah, I can't. I start to hurt for a long period of time. Even when I'm sleeping, I have to keep rotating like every hour. Take a lot of meds. So I'm currently not taking that many meds because of, baby. But
right. Brianna's pregnant,
which is making me suffer more because I didn't think about that from the jump. But I need my meds, so it's kind of a struggle not being able to go from like 20-some meds to nothing at all except one or two meds, and Tylenol is completely horrible. And it's like it's PTSD meds, it's neurological
because
meds.
You've been having.
Yeah.
I mean, how have the nightmares affected you?
It's gotten better with the meds before the pregnancy, because it got to the point where they had to control my dreams. Like, they stopped my dreams completely so I can sleep. So I'm taking a lot of heavy meds just to get me to sleep.
Right.
Because dreaming was horrible for me. For years, it was horrible for me. But the worst thing is the neurological, because there's moments, a lot of moments, where my skin burned because I have clothes on, or if you rub against me with a feather, it'll burn for at least 15, 20 minutes before it actually goes away. It's especially after the situation happened, like the sleep was really, really bad. I woke up screaming and hollering from the pain, not only the pain, dreams. Had to rotate ice packs every 2 hours.
Right.
And nobody, whoever was in the house with me, didn't get sleep either. So
Right.
it was the first few months was rough, really rough for me, especially because of not getting sleep because of the pain.
Right.
And dealing with the facial pain, going through physical therapy. I'm still in and out of physical therapy. For a while, like, I'm still on and off a cane, on and off a walker to this day.
Right.
I literally just got off a cane a few days ago. So,
And you had told me that only now have you been cleared to drive.
yeah, just recently got cleared to drive because with me not getting no sleep and the neural effects stuff,
Right.
it was causing me to, with the pain and stuff, it was causing me, and then with me having one eye now, like different lighting could cause me to pass out. Because they said sometimes the lighting is really, really strong on my one eye, and it makes me black out. So, like, I would pass out a lot, like to the point where I'll be laid out in the hallway on the stairs before I get to my apartment door, or I'm falling out outside. At one point, I had to get a nurse for a while. About a year ago, not even a year ago, it hasn't even been this year. Beginning of this year, I had to get a nurse for a while. They are considering me getting another one, but I haven't thought about that yet.
Another.
I'm trying to get on my own so I won't have to have somebody following me around 24/7.
Right.
But they did consider me getting another nurse from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday.
You said that some of the effects of what happened are starting to be felt by your son, who's now how old?
He's 7 now.
And how has that affected him?
He has nightmares of people kidnapping me and hurting me, and he'll randomly say stuff like, "Mommy, somebody's hurting you or trying to kidnap you," or he reported to his teacher that I was bleeding in the back of a car. He recently told me that he would protect me and keep me safe. So he does have little flashbacks to the point where he has to go back to counseling now. But I'm trying not to. He's noticed I have had drawn some things out, and he kind of put 2 and 2 together. Hey, that's me and you. I drew a picture of what happened. So he's starting to notice, like, hey, this really did happen to us.
Right.
Because he asked me in one of the pictures that I drew, he was like, "Mommy, that's me and you." I told him no, but
Right.
it really was me and him.
Right. And you were doodling away while we were talking about some other aspects of the story, and turns out you're a very talented artist.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow. Everybody sitting around the table was like, "Who's that?"
I've drawn some pictures of different versions of different situations that happen in the scenery. Like, there's one of me, but was a puppet. It's a puppet woman, and her hands are tied with these bloody ropes. But the rest of the picture, only the ropes is red, and the rest of the picture is charcoal, so it's black and white. There's another picture of me blocking my son, and there's one person holding a knife, one person holding bleach, one person holding the gun. And it's I have a few pictures, that I've drawn out to explain a little bit of different pieces of what happened in different time periods of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's something to actually get it out of my head. And then it actually helps build me, because it's like, okay, I can look at this and say, hey, I made it through that.
Right.
And since I can make it through that, I can make it through anything else.
Yeah.
So it does, because sometimes I feel like, not strong, but every time I look at it, I'm like, yeah, you are.
You're strong. You're beast mode. In the best way.
Yeah. So, yeah, other than the PTSD, the insomnia,
Yeah.
it's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, especially when I'm off meds for a certain amount of time. It's a lot.
Well, thank you for coming in and sharing this. I just want to take a moment while we're wrapping up. I think by this time you understand what Brianna has gone through and how difficult her road to recovery is. And that's why we established the GoFundMe page. It's helping Brianna. The money she gets just doesn't really cover her expenses, and she could really use the help. No matter how small the donation may be, I thank you on her behalf. Again, that's the GoFundMe page. It's helping Brianna. And one of the things that you're doing in your life is speaking to groups.
Mentoring to younger adults, foster kids, and just giving them a piece of my story so I could try to help them out.
Right.
So I do that. I think I want to be a caseworker.
Uh-huh.
I want to be a mentor so I can get the word out of, hey, this is not the route that you want to go.
Right. Thank you very much for doing this. This group wanted to come together. Sometimes I do some stuff over Zoom. Everybody wanted to get in the room with you. And Nikki flew in from Phoenix, and Katie drove 4 hours from D.C., and I came in from Nashville. We all came to see you. We could have done this over Zoom, but we were like, no, this is an extraordinary woman who's been through something. And thanks to Team America, the Capital Area Regional Fugitive Task Force, Nikki, Lance, and Chris, and to Matt Walsh from Norfolk PD. And thank you very much, Katie, for driving down and really giving an explanation that I haven't heard before. I was so excited to kind of get the answers to questions I always had.
I'm glad that you don't find it super boring, because sometimes I think it is.
Nope, I liked it. Miss Brianna.
I just want to say thank you to everybody who looked for me, who helped me, who guided me through this. Because I don't know how I would have did it without you guys. Honestly, just to know that I had so much support, it kind of really helped me, and everybody that helped me get through courts, and it was a lot. It was a lot.
Anytime.
So just thank you to everybody, all of you guys. Actually, that it really means a lot to know that I had people to look for me and help me and support me through court and have my back through this whole situation. So I'm very grateful for you all.
And I would say thank you to Brianna, because sometimes you can try cases where you don't have victims or they don't cooperate, but this is not one of those cases. We needed Brianna's involvement. And I can tell you that that is not always what we get in cases like this. People are afraid. Fortunately, they were never serious because we knew where Brianna was and she was safe, but there were discussions about harming her. When we brought her in for the preliminary hearing, have a whole special escort to and from the courthouse. And it would be very easy for many people who went through what she did and risked as much as she did to come forward and put this all out there. A lot of people would have told us that they were not willing to do that. And so in a lot of cases like this, people would have walked away for this with just a slap on the wrist, and we would have had to just get what we could get. The only reason we were able to have the successful prosecution was due to the cooperation of everybody involved, but most importantly, that Brianna was on board for every step of the way, and without her, this case would not have been possible.
And finally, Chasing Evil is produced with the cooperation of the U.S. Marshals Service. It contains interviews with current and retired employees as well as other persons. Opinions, positions, and views expressed by any of them may not reflect the official views, positions, or policies of the United States Marshals Service. Stay safe, everyone.